Now then, hello everyone. I hope you're doing okay. It's a little bit sad because potentially this could be the last session we have together. If you're looking at another course to do, then please get on board another course, but let's make this a good one. It's one of my favorite sessions to deliver, and it's about overcoming obstacles. So let's look at what we're going to be covering. Do us a favor though, while I'm sharing my screen, what was your biggest insight to the last module that we did? Looking at asking yourself better questions. What was your biggest insight? Let me know. What areas of your life did you decide to make the biggest change in? So we're looking at overcoming obstacles. This again is going to be a mindset workshop, and there's going to be a skill set issue at the end. Overcoming obstacles for me, if you've got enough reason to do something, then whatever obstacles are in the way, you're gonna overcome them. You've got a big enough, and it's not motivation. Motivation isn't what we're looking for. It's not motivation. It's a purpose, having a purpose. So here we go. So the aims of today's session and the last session we're going to be doing on managing change, to explore obstacles, making changes. For this, we're going to be looking at obstacles mainly of mindset. So we're going to look at understanding leverage and how we can make leverage work for us. Understanding that we're very often motivated by both pleasure and pain. And if we can combine the two, we can create a compelling reason and a purpose to strive to meet our changes, to deliver on our promises that we're making people. Because don't get it twisted. If there's a change of behavior needed, potentially that's a negative change of behavior that you need to make, that you need to improve upon. And at the moment, there's a reason why you need to make it, because it's probably affecting your family life, your home life, maybe your kids, your job, your finances, your health, your welfare. You need to make that change. And the best way you're going to do it is to create a compelling outcome, create leverage, and understand that there's a pain involved and there's a pleasure involved. And these two factors combined will be a game changer for you. Almost another superpower to make you awesome and handle change as and when it comes. Remember what we spoke about at the beginning of this course, that the amount of change or uncertainty you can handle on a daily basis is directly proportionate to the quality of your life. And throughout this training package, we give you all the tools, the tricks, the mindset hacks to be able to deal with change like a gangster, yeah? Like a boss, like a professional. So we're going to explore those. Explore a method of planning. Again, we're going back to planning. So this is more the skill set side. There's a form with exercise we want to get you to fill in. And then demonstrate the value of consulting others, an interesting perspective. We always get bogged down in our reasons why we want to do something, our way of doing things. There's definite value in asking peers, mentors, family members, their advice, how they would go about constructing a plan to make the change required. And then all we do is adapt, and they might have an insight, because obviously we talk about models of the world. My model of the world is different to the way my wife's model of the world is. My model of the world is different to Dave's model of the world. When I ask Dave's opinion on something or Laura's opinion, they're going to look from their model of the world. Hang on, my screen's gone a bit funny there. Whoa, what's happening? So they're looking at it from their model of the world. It's very difficult. And again, it's a skill that needs practice for me to be able to see something from another person's model of the world. That is the skill. That is the technique. But if someone else can give me some insight, then why wouldn't I take on board that insight? I don't have to use it. Just take it on board. It might create a new angle, a new frame, a new way of coming at something. So that's where we are on this final training course, this final module. Right? Let's get into this now. So we understand that we're creating leverage. And I want you to understand a basic idea of leverage. It might be a word you're not familiar with. You might be familiar with the word, but not really know how to utilize it in terms of creating motivation, drive, creating purpose. So I'm just going to show you a little model that can really demonstrate this. So imagine we've got an obstacle that needs moving. So we've got to lift this box. Yeah. And here's the stick that I'm going to move the box with. And there's me leverage. There's me fulcrum. Yeah. So when I exert pressure down on the end of the lever, in this diagram, I'm never going to move that box. It's never going to move. Yeah. So I'm going to push down on that, and there's not enough leverage. Not got enough leverage here to be able to move the box. So we create leverage. So we're going to learn how to create enough leverage so when we push down and we come up against obstacles, we've got all this leverage created. We've created all this purpose, all this room, all this information, what we can leverage on to get through the obstacles. Because you know what happens? Imagine an X and Y axis. And we create outcomes. We need to make a change. And we're motivated, yeah? We're motivated. We spoke to our wife, spoke to our family. We know what change needs to be made. It's uncomfortable, but we're in a good headspace. We've corrected our state, what we spoke about before. We've planned. And then we start, yeah? And we build momentum, and we build momentum. And then we hit a few pitfalls. And then motivation wanes. And then self-talk starts to kick in. And then we start losing momentum. And before we know it, we plateau out. And then we fall off. Yeah, we've all been there before. I get it. I've been there before. Yeah, I understand what everyone's going through. I understand that thought pattern. Definitely. But we're going to create leverage. All right. Now, I want you to understand that we're motivated by pleasure and pain. You can understand sometimes in people's language, this comes across when you ask them about the goals, what they've got, or the changes, do they phrase it as, I want to move towards something? So you could say, in terms of a change. You want to lose a bit of weight for your health. All right. Your health's deteriorating. You want to make a change. So in people's language, they might say something like, if they're moving towards pleasure, I want to lose 2 stone so I can play with my kids, so I can run a marathon. I want to get to 10 stone. They're looking towards pleasure. Whereas the other way of creating motivation, creating leverage, is to move away from pain. I do not want to weigh 18 stone anymore. I do not want to be out of breath climbing the stairs. Can you see the slight nuance there in the language? So people either move towards pleasure and away from pain. And we're going to we're linking them both together to create an even more compelling picture. Yeah? Next exercise we're going to look at before we get onto the actual paperwork on the PDF is we're going to ask ourselves again, the power of questions comes down to the last module that we covered. We're going to look at Cartesian questions. These are used in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. I've used these questions, and we're going to work through the example that I use them for, a live example again, so you can see the process. These questions will start to make you think about the pleasure, moving towards something, and moving away from the pain. And they're worded in such a way that will make you think about that aspect. Really clever, really useful tool. What I will say is when you're working through these questions, one question in particular is going to be a bit of a mind melt. Yeah, it's going to wreck your head a little bit. And I don't want you to just try and answer them straight away. That's why in the introduction, we actually asked you to maybe only concentrate on one module per week. For this reason, some of the questions are going to wreck your head seriously. Even now, when I try and I have to say it to myself a few more times to be able to understand. And the reason being is it messes up the relationship between the left side, conscious, what's the word I'm looking for? It confuses the left side of the brain. It skews the relationship between the right and the left side of the brain. And you'll see when we get to the question, it's a bit of a mind melt. And I want you to take your time answering it. Seriously, take your time answering it. So these are the questions. And I'll go through the questions and then I'll talk you through my example. So the first question. So what will happen if you do the change that you're trying to make? Yeah. So what will happen if you do the change? The next question. What will happen if you don't make the change? Yeah. So what will happen if you do? What will happen if you don't? So now we take the inverse of that. What won't happen if you do? And this is the question that's the bit of the head wrecker. What won't happen if you don't? So let's cover them again. So we're talking about the change. So whatever change you nominated in the aspect of your life. So if you remember from the last module, I looked at fun, and I looked at a basic example of being able to relax my mind, get work out of my head, and be able to be present with my family and enjoy and relax, whatever fun means to you. To do that, I needed to change and stop using my phone after a certain amount of time. That was the change that I was looking at making. Yeah, very basic example, just to give you the idea. So what will happen if I do that, if I make that change? What will happen if I turn my phone off at 7 o'clock every evening? What will happen if I don't turn my phone off at 7 in the evening? What won't happen if I turn my phone off at 7 o'clock in the evening? What won't happen if I don't turn my phone off at 7 in the evening? Yeah? So let's number these. So question 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's look the answers for question 1. So question 1 was, what will happen if I do? And I'm going to use a different example now. In 2015, I left an 11-year career in the MOD police. I lived down south. I lived down in Reading. And that was a massive change. That was a massive change that had to be planned. It had to be discussed. There were a lot of moving parts. Mindset and skill set came into play. A lot of insecurities, a lot of issues around identity, but a lot of skill set issues. I wasn't very good with technology, computers, email, CVs, job interviews, a lot of skill set issues. So it's a perfect example to use, plus the actual ecology of, we made the decision to move 200 mile back up north, back to St. Helens, back to the northwest. That had to be discussed in such a way that we covered all bases to see whether it was an actual good move for everyone involved. And this set of questions was integral to making the decision, which led to ultimately planning, putting a plan in place, understanding what the gaps were, and understanding what the obstacles were. But then as a result of this set of questions and the plan, why we were doing it, what we were moving away from, what we were moving towards, the pleasure and pain, it created enough leverage that when times were tough, and times were tough, I get it, as you're probably going through now, a tough time, we had enough leverage and purpose to see it through to ultimately where we are today. So the answers to question 1, what will happen if I leave the police and move back up north? So the answers that I've written down here, I get a better quality of life. Excuse the writing, by the way. So better quality of life, better home life. I put these down because I was working shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 4 days on, 4 days off. Sometimes working weekends, sometimes working nights over the weekend. So it was a very hard work-life balance. What will happen if I leave? It allowed me to be more creative. I was kind of stuck in a rut in the police. Obviously, you can imagine following procedures. Every 12 hours of your day was set, what you had to do when you could have your meal break. There was no real room for any initiative, any creativity. So that allowed me to be creative. I'll be closer to my family and friends. And what will happen if I do? I'll probably immediately take a pay cut. Again, we're taking a lot of the emotion out of it and dealing in fact. Yeah. So now we go on to question 2. What will happen if I don't? If I don't leave the MOD police and move back up north, my mental health will suffer. Yeah, because I'm in a job that I'm not satisfied by. It's not stimulating enough. You spend more time at work than you do at home or with your family. So that's a massive chunk of my life that I'm not going to be happy. So my mental health will suffer. My relationships will suffer. I'll imagine the relationship with me, my family and my wife would start to deteriorate because of my negative behaviors. I won't see my family as much. I'm 200 miles away. See what we're getting at here? So now let's start to look at the opposites. So what will happen? Sorry, what won't happen if I do? What won't happen if I move home? I won't be a police officer anymore. Yeah. So looking at identity issues, who will I be then? What will my identity be? I won't be on the same wage. I won't be on the same pension. I won't live in the same area that we did. We lived in a little village called Thatcham, just outside of Newbury, and it was lovely. Just on the M4 corridor, just outside of Newbury. Beautiful part of the country, expensive part of the country, but it was a lovely little area. We won't live there anymore. We actually liked where we live. We loved the area. So we're thinking of all these different options. And now the head melts. What won't happen if I don't? Yeah, so I understand, I get it if this confuses you a little bit, but it's important that you think about it. What won't happen? So what won't happen if I don't leave the MOD and move back up north? What won't happen? We won't be able to afford to buy our own house. Yeah, house prices were massive down there, most expensive part of the country. We couldn't afford the deposit. No way. What won't happen if I don't? I won't get on the housing market, yeah? What won't happen if I don't leave the MOD police? We won't be able to afford to get married. We just didn't have the disposable income. Yes, I was on a good wage, but not for the actual area. The London waiting area, Thames Valley, expensive part of the country. We wouldn't be able to afford to get married. So what won't happen if I don't leave the MOD police? What won't happen? I won't get the chance to maybe one day run my own business. Be self-employed. To have the freedom to be creative. What won't happen if I don't leave the MOD police? I won't have a good work-life balance. Screen stuck, hang on. so I won't have a good work-life balance. So does that make sense? That's a really interesting way now of when you've got your answers sorted. Hang on, my screen's just froze. Why is that happening? So if you look at the structure of the questions that we've looked at there, you'll notice that depending on how the question's phrased, it makes you, they're actually like just the opposite. So question 4, what won't happen if you don't, is more or less the opposite of what will happen if you do. What will happen if you do? What won't happen if you don't? It's the exact mirror image. Just makes you think about it a certain way. One of them is worded more for moving away from pain. One of them is worded to move towards pleasure. Really clever, useful tool. My screen's stuck. Really clever, useful tool. So carry out that exercise. Understand we're creating this leverage. Why do we want to do stuff? What are the obstacles? We've looked at what the obstacles potentially are in our plan, and now it's time to overcome those obstacles. We overcome those obstacles by creating enough leverage. So let's move on to the activity on the handout. For some reason, do you know what? We've been really good throughout this training package. My phone hasn't had a meltdown once. And we get to the last module. Hey, there we go. Killing it. Yes. So now we're going to look using the example we come up with last time. Looking at somebody else's angle from it, looking at another perspective. Yeah, like a third person. So I want you to, whether that's a peer, a mentor, a family member, get them to write their name on the form. You're going to fill the first bit in. They're going to fill the last bit. So let's just run through this form. So the person's name, you're going to write the change or your goal you're setting. So from my example again, I'm moving home after spending 15 years down south. I'm leaving my job in the police and I'm moving back home. The job's another part of the plan. I've got to get a job. But the initial thing is to decide whether we want to move back home, make that decision, make that change. So that's what I'm setting. Obstacles to achieving it. In this example, the person's used fear of being on their own, not knowing anyone to talk to, unsure how they will cope, negative thoughts, lacking emotion, getting tense and panicking. And then you hand it to the person who you're asking for their perspective from. And they're going to build a little bit of a plan for you. They're going to give their perspective of how you should go about doing it. So let's fill this in live. So the name of the person I'm going to ask to fill this in for me. And I'll use Dave Sheridan. Change or goal I'm setting is move back to hometown and leave the MOD. The obstacles to achieving, where do we start? Jesus. So this is a real life example. This is some of the stuff that I had to get over. Mindset, skill set issues. So the first thing was getting a job. Finding a house. Having a skill set. At the time, yes, I was a police officer. I thought those skills would help me find another job. I was deeply mistaken. I wasn't necessarily qualified to do another job. So, relevant skill sets. Getting a job, finding a house, relevant skill set. Moving all our belongings. Don't forget, Laura had all these issues too. So finding Laura a job. Traveling for interviews. Getting time off work for interviews. Can you see how there's a lot going on here? I know we've used quite basic examples, but I wanted to emphasize the same procedures, the same stuff we're teaching you in this course apply to any problem that you're having. This is a really complex problem. It's a complex challenge. It was a complex change to make. There was a lot of steps and there's a lot of things that needed to be put in place. So that's why we had to have a priority list. We had to have a plan and we had to get our mindset straight. So there were some of the challenges. There was many, many more, but for the sake of getting through this training package and not overwhelming you, there were some of the obstacles. So now I hand that to my mentor or a peer. Dave goes away, Dave comes back, and he says, right, first thing you've got to do, Dave, is amend your CV. I'll tell you what, we'll do it a different colour. Dave says you've got to amend your CV. I never thought of that. Such a simple thing, but amending my CV. Let me come back to something in a minute. I'm just going to write controller. I'm going to come back to that. So amend my CV. All right. So then I would say, this is speaking from Dave's point of view. Dave's advised me, his plan would be to amend my CV, upload it, then write down everyone who you know, who either owns a business, could put in a good word for you. I never thought of that either. I'm not really one for like pulling on favors from people, but again, it's a different perspective. Who do you know? What's the next thing you need to do? Find out what you want to do for a job. What can you do as a job? Have you thought about living back with your parents to take the stress away from finding somewhere to live till you're settled up there? Ask your mum and dad. Some of you might not be fortunate enough to have that support network around you. Again, that's another obstacle that it's just on the way. It's not in the way. It's just another obstacle, another problem to solve. Dave then turns around and says, have you thought about applying for such a thing? Security, get your security badge, get your SIA badge. It's a job that many ex-police officers go into just to get yourself back up north, get a foothold in the door, and then you can decide what you want to do. So all these different perspectives, and then Dave gives it back to me, and I amend it. So yeah, amend CV. Definitely I can do that. Yeah, that's excellent. That's on the list. Upload it. Yeah. Who do I know I can look at do that? Look at different jobs I can do. Oh, well, I quite enjoy driving actually. What about getting HGV license or um, another perspective? Yeah. Ask mum and dad. They've not really got room. That's kind of out of the question. So I need to think of another option for that. So just see how carrying out this exercise, somebody else's perspective from somebody else's model of the world. I wouldn't have thought about doing the CV. That is the first thing that I should probably be doing. What qualifications do I need? See what I mean? Let's come back to this control. Part of the skill. Part of the skill in overcoming obstacles and reducing overwhelm and not getting stressed. And this is a good segue to maybe some of the other courses that we've got on offer. Dealing with self-care, looking after yourself. Nothing more important than if you can't look after yourself, how are you supposed to look after the loved ones, your family, your kids? So other subject matters, for example, are self-care, dealing with relationships, dealing with conflict. So if you're interested, look for another course that we're running. And if it's something that takes your interest or something you feel like you could learn more about, then let's get involved. Yeah. But a lot of it, especially in this overcoming obstacles and dealing with change, is a real mindset shift. And I'm surprised I've not really brought this subject up before when we talk about what we can control, because I'm a massive proponent of stoicism. If you've ever listened to some of the stuff that I do in some of my other walks of life, I'm a massive fan of stoicism, and it's something that I do implement. And I started reading stoicism probably like around 2008, 2009. So well over 10 years ago. And basically, it's a philosophy on how to actually be objective and take away a lot of the emotion and a lot of the overwhelm and the stress that we deal with when we come to looking at life and obstacles. Yeah. And the three main, I would say, pillars are looking at what, hang on. The three main pillars are looking at what we can control. What we can control. So understanding the difference between things that are out of our control and things that are in our control, and not wasting energy on worrying about stuff that is outside of our influence or outside our control. Yeah. So I'm not going to worry about whether I can go and get a job. That is out of my control, essentially. But what I can control is, is my CV on point? Have I got the skill sets that I need to get that job? Have I got enough knowledge on the company that I'm going working for? I'm using the example of job interviews. It could be anything, but stuff that you can control, how well prepared you are, and what I can't control. I can't control if someone else offers me a job. So that kind of takes the worry and the anxiety out of, I need to get a job. Oh my God, I need to get a job. I need to pay this, I need to pay that. Take the worry away from the thing you can't control. What I can control is my thoughts and my actions, the mindset and the skill set. Another tenet of stoicism is looking at what is the behavior. Yeah. So I can only control what I can control. And essentially all that is my thought and my actions. So making looking at things objectively, what is the next best decision and course of action? So being objective. Thinking of things not with emotion, but through a lens of objectivity. Like we've been doing in this training course so far, right through from module 1 all the way to now. The plans that we're putting in place are not involving emotion. We're taking that away so we can implement a plan and a strategy. Quite cold-hearted, yeah, I get it, I understand, but it needs to be that way. Otherwise, you're going to be reduced to God knows what. Reduced to a nervous wreck because it's overwhelming, it's stressful. So understand what you can and can't control and be objective. Give me your biggest takeaway from today. We've covered a lot of stuff today. There's a lot of information. I understand it's a lot to take in. Tell me your biggest takeaway. Like I said, I recommend you do this module over the week. Look at those questions, those Cartesian questions. Take a bit of time. Change your state. Get something off the happy list. Get into a good state. Sit down and engage in those questions. Really think about those questions. Asking yourself more powerful questions is going to help you create the leverage and the purpose to execute these changes that we've spoke about during this whole training package. So that's it from us. Flip the script unless you decide to join us on another training course. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope you've got a lot out of it. And these are skills and a mindset that you can adopt for the rest of your life. But do some further reading. Don't take my word for it. Don't just sit on this course now. Do your own exploration. Do your own research. Question everything we've been telling you. Does it sit well with you? How does it sit well? Read up on Stoicism. Read some of the books I've been referring to. Read up on the art of breathing. Read up on NLP. But enjoy the process. Enjoy learning. Enjoy being a white belt at something. Anyway, take it easy. Leave us some feedback. And if you think and you valued this course and you think somebody else can get something from it, recommend it to a friend. Tell people about it. I'm really proud of what we've created here in this training package. And I have an obligation to put it out there because it's going to be massive. People will get massive value from what we've put out. And I don't mind saying that. I'm really proud of what we've created. Flip the script, managing change. So we'll see you on the other side. Take care. See you soon.